Making Your Marriage Work with your host, Steve and Connie Corona.
Today we're going to continue the series that we've been on for the last, this is the 4th week now, talking about money and finances and how those affect your marriage. We've talked about giving, we've talked about attitudes about marriage, we've talked about budgeting, and last week we started talking about debt and what debt does to a marriage, and we're going to continue that for a while today. And when we talk about what debt is, there's a Hebrew word that I want to introduce to everybody. The Hebrew word yad, Y-A-D, yad. And the Hebrew word yad means a possession actually owned or controlled by another. And so debt means that you have, you owe someone money and now they have control of you, or they have control of your use of an item that you have. That's what debt actually is. So we talked about the spirit of debt last time, the spirit of debt being I want it now. I have to have it now. Now I want to ask you a question. You know, it's a joke on sitcoms and among people that women are really the spendthrifts in families, that women are the ones who blow the family budget out the window. Is that really true in your opinion?
I don't think I think it's not necessarily men or women. It's each individual marriage. There's going to be one person that tends to be a little bit more, because opposites attract. One person's going to be more conservative than the other one is going to be. And it may be a woman, it may be a man. It just depends on each situation.
Okay, so it's not always the women though.
No, absolutely not. Very, very often. In fact, in my counseling situation, mostly it's the men that are the ones that are irresponsible with the finances.
Well, so what are the men doing with the finances? I mean, if the women are accused of going shopping sprees all the time. They're buying clothes, they're buying jewelry, they're buying this kind of thing. But if women are not the ones most of the time messing up the family budget, what are the men doing?
Well, a lot of times men they haven't lived out, they've had dreams about what it would be to grow up and be a man and be able to make your own choices. And they think now they're grown and they can do whatever they want. And so they buy cars that they probably can't afford, or they purchase. A lot of times with a man, their self-esteem is involved in how they spend money. They spend money to impress other people sometimes. Business-wise, sometimes men get messed up and they get over their head financially in business activities, businesses and things, because they are trying to have to impress people with what they know or what they're able to do, and it hurts their family.
Okay. Well, you know, I found that many people want to give the impression of prosperity when they're not really prosperous. They want to, it's a hypocritical lifestyle. I want you to think I'm doing better than I'm really doing. I want you to think I have more faith than I really have. I want you to think that I'm able to walk in a level financially with God that I can't really walk in. So it's easy to use a credit card, it's easy to use a line of credit, it's easy to get out there and get yourself extended financially because you want to give people an impression of yourself that's not true. And I have much more respect for someone who's willing to drive an older automobile, but they know where their faith level is. It's paid for, or it's nearly paid for, and they're not head over heels in debt and can't pay their bills. I have much more respect for that person than the person who's buying a brand new Lexus, but they're behind on their payments all the time because they don't have enough income and they don't have enough faith to actually keep that lifestyle going.
Yeah.
And we need to look at this whole issue of debt very, very closely and ask ourselves, is God really pleased with our lifestyle and what we're doing with our money? So much of our money's going for interest, honey. A lot of it is going for interest.
And I don't think that pleases the Lord.
You know, I believe that with the interest that Christians are paying on their homes, their cars, their credit cards, just their unsecured debt, with the interest that Christians are paying, they could buy everything they want and finance the evangelization of the world. With the interest that we're paying. Think about it. We really need to be serious about this whole idea of debt. So we talked about what debt is. Is all debt bad? Is
No.
all debt bad?
No, I don't think so. If you look at, well, for instance, if you can borrow money at a low interest rate and lend it out at a higher interest rate, that kind of debt's not bad.
Okay, and there are actually institutions that do that.
Yeah.
Exodus
It's just
22. Pardon?
That's just wise.
It would be wise to do that. Exodus 22:23 talks about lending to God's people. Psalm 37:25 and 26 says that the righteous lends to the poor. Proverbs 19:17 says that he who gives to the poor lends to the Lord. So all borrowing can't be bad. Otherwise, the Bible wouldn't be saying that the righteous is to lend, or that even that he who gives to the poor lends to the Lord. Does that mean that every time we give to the poor and lend to the Lord, that God is sinning because He's borrowing from us? That's what the Bible says there in Proverbs 19:17. So all debt is not necessarily bad, but so much of it is, and many people watching this program are in debt, head over heels in debt, paying excessive debt. That credit card that you got at 0% interest and you thought, wow, this is a great deal, and you ran it up to the limit, and then they got you. Because after 6 months, 9 months, or a year, now they're charging you 12.99% interest on that credit card, and you can't possibly afford to pay it off. When we come back from the break, we want to start talking about when is borrowing okay? When is it okay to borrow, and when is it not okay to borrow? We'll be right back. So when is borrowing okay? When is it okay for us to borrow money to purchase something?
Well, I think an obvious answer to that is when it's time to purchase a home. Very few people pay cash for their house, for the home they live in.
That would be a good thing, wouldn't it?
Oh yes, certainly. To purchase a home sometimes makes a lot more sense than renting, because when you're renting, you're just pouring money down the drain. And when you're purchasing a home, you're paying interest, but over the long haul, your house is increasing in value to cover the interest that you're paying.
So you're borrowing money to pay on an appreciating asset.
Yes.
Is that what you're talking about?
That's what I'm talking about. The same thing is true with any asset that's going to appreciate. If you're borrowing if it's a proven for sure business deal. Maybe I shouldn't even go here because everybody thinks their business deal is proven and for sure. But
Okay.
if it's a proven business deal, in other words, you've been in this business for some time, and you know you've made steady improvements, it's grown, it's continued to grow, and with a certain amount of money, you could make you move it up another level, and you know that you're going to be. You've researched it. You've had people that know a lot about what you're doing give you advice, and you've researched it, and you really are sure that it's a good investment. Then sometimes to borrow money for that on a short-term basis is acceptable.
Well, look at the people that borrow money though on business deals that don't go well, on businesses, on starting business startups, and that I mean, there's a business startup that closes every day.
Yes, that's true. Well, you need to be careful. Again, you're talking about a business startup. I'm talking about a business that's proven itself over time and that you've grown it. There's a place in the Bible where it says that wealth gathered little by little stays with you.
Okay.
And so many people are looking for a get-rich-quick scheme, or a
Right.
get-rich. If I get into this business, then I'll be rich next year or the year after or whatever. And a good, steady, growing business that has proven itself over time would be a good investment, short-term investment.
Right. Okay.
As far as borrowing money.
Right. But so, what about borrowing money for a vacuum cleaner? Is that a good investment? Some of the
No.
guys are probably saying, "Yeah, please, honey, go out and buy a vacuum cleaner."
You can buy a vacuum cleaner for $60.
What if you don't have? What if I want to put $60 on my credit card for a vacuum cleaner?
No, I think you probably need to use the one you've got until you have it. If you're completely without a vacuum cleaner, of course you've got to keep your house clean. But there are other ways to do that. Even you can borrow one from your mom.
Well, I guess the point I'm making is we're talking about borrowing money for appreciating assets.
Yeah, okay.
So is a vacuum cleaner going to appreciate when we buy it?
It's going to devalue. Actually, even a car.
That was my next question.
Yeah.
What about a car?
A car, it loses value the minute you drive it off the lot.
The minute you drive it off the lot, your car begins to depreciate. And we have borrowed money for cars. Many people are just borrowed up to here for automobiles that are depreciating. And so when you go back to trade it in, we're so excited about the trade-in value of automobiles, not realizing, look how much interest we have paid on an automobile. So when is borrowing okay? When you're borrowing short-term for an appreciating asset, when you can repay quickly. Short-term for an appreciating asset, don't take 30 years to pay for your home. You need to double up on those payments. You need to ask your mortgage company for a schedule, a mortgage schedule that shows how much interest, how much principal, and you need to be paying extra principal on your home. And don't take 30 years to pay for your home. The interest that you're paying is astronomical. Even at 5%, even at 5.25%, you are still paying a lot of interest on that home. Also, borrowing is okay. In addition to that, when you can repay it quickly. Don't look at, most people, when they buy items on credit, I've found this true so many times, they don't know how much the item cost.
Yeah.
They don't know. How much did you pay for your car? I'm not really sure, but the payments are only $349.
Yeah.
We know how much the payments are. We don't know how much the car costs. We don't know how much the vacuum cleaner costs. We don't know how much we're spending, really, and we don't know how much the interest adds up to. So it's very, very important that you analyze this whole debt thing. I'm sure that when I asked a question earlier in the program, is all debt bad? And we both agreed no. A lot of people breathed a sigh of relief. It's not time to breathe a sigh of relief yet. You need to examine what you owe and what you owe on, and because some of the debt you have, you need to get out of that as quick as you can. And I want to point out again the book that I pointed out on the last program, which is The Victory Book by John Avanzini. This is a terrific book to help you get out of debt. I know I talked about it a lot on the last program, so I won't go into a lot of detail now, but everybody needs this book. It's a get out of debt plan. It's terrific. Every family watching this program needs to get this book. Go to www.makingyourmarriagework.com and click on the link for the resources, and you can order that book from us. And you need to get it because it's a great, great book. We talked about Exodus 22:23 that says we need to lend to God's people. That Psalm 37 says that the righteous lends. So we talked about when is borrowing okay. When is lending okay? Somebody comes to you and wants to borrow money. When is it okay to lend to them?
When you have the money to lend them.
Well, that would be a good point.
And you don't have to sweat it to get it back, because you also need to. If you realize, I've known people that have lent money to someone who was in need, and they really truly didn't have the money to lend because they had to have it by a certain time, otherwise they themselves were going to be in a difficult situation. So they would lend the money thinking they're doing a good thing, only to find out this person is not able to pay them back like they said they would be able to. Then the relationship becomes strained, and bad things start to happen from that point on. So if you've got money, if you've got a storehouse and you've got money in your storehouse and God speaks to you to lend it to someone, then that's fine. But you need to be able to roll with the punches as far as the way they pay you back.
We're talking about when is lending okay. When we went to the break, you were talking about lending money and when lending was okay. When in your heart you can release control of what you've lent to somebody, then it would be okay to loan someone some money. When you are lending something to someone and you still got it, remember the word debt in the Hebrew is the Hebrew word yad, which means a possession actually owned or controlled by another. And if you're going to try to control another person's life, another person's possessions, even the possession that you loaned the money for them to purchase, if you're going to have that spirit of control on you, don't do it. Don't do it. You need to lend money to people and be able to release that. So that, and the reason you do that is because if for some reason they can't repay it, you want the relationship to still be solid. So Connie and I have done that. We've been in situations where we've loaned money and we've had to ask ourselves, what happens if this person doesn't repay this? What are we going to do? How are we going to act? How are we going to feel? Can we release this? Are we going to be able to release this? If we can't, we don't do it.
Yeah.
So lending is okay when in your heart you know you can release it. But if you can't, don't feel bad about saying no. Sometimes there are people that want to borrow from you and you just don't have a good feeling about it.
Yeah. And you just because you have the money doesn't mean you should loan it. You know, just because someone asks you for it.
Right.
You really need to evaluate what are they going to use it for. You really need to, you have the right to do what the bank does, to look and see what are they going to use it for, and is it a valid investment? Is it even a wise thing for them to be doing? You know,
but because we're Christians, Christians sometimes do some of the dumbest things. Because we're Christians, we don't want to have a contract. We want to take one another's word for everything because we don't want the other person to feel like we mistrust them. But so often it's not an issue of mistrust, it's an issue of understanding what we're both saying. Now, you told me you were going to repay this at the 1st of next month. No, what I said, I was going to repay it at the 30th of next month. Well, no, I can't wait till the 30th. I said the 1st. No, you said the 30th. And now we have a relationship break, plus the person who lent the money is now in a difficult financial situation that they didn't realize they were going to get in, and it's all because it wasn't in writing. Some people use the excuse, I don't put things in writing with people because we're Christians. I say that's exactly the reason you should. It's because you're Christians and your relationship is more important than the money.
That's right.
And as pastors, have we seen this happen a lot?
Too much.
So, sometimes it bothers me a little bit when I see Christians. I know it inevitably is going to happen, but sometimes it bothers me a little bit when I see Christians getting in business deals with other Christians, Christians lending money to other Christians, because I've seen over the years so many relationships that have been destroyed because of the person who owes someone else money in the church, or the person who invested in a business deal and that business deal went sour and now that relationship has split up, and ultimately one or the other of these people is going to get offended and leave the church because of this business deal or because of this debt. So it really does bother me. I know it's going to happen. I know the Bible says that we should lend to our brothers and sisters. We should bless our brothers and sisters. I know the Bible says we should do that, and so I'm all for that, but please be careful. Please watch what you're doing and be sure that that you're doing it scripturally. And if you're already out there, listen, you're already in a business deal with somebody in your church or another Christian, if you've already loaned money to a person in your church or to another Christian, and that has gone sour, my advice to you is to forgive. Forgive it. You can't. Your relationship with that person can't afford it, and your relationship with God can't afford it. I know that they told you that they were going to do something that now has not materialized, but you've got to ask yourself, what's more important to you? Stewing and being angry over this financial situation, or your relationship with God and your ability to forgive a brother or sister? You probably shouldn't have gotten into the deal in the first place. But if you found you've made a mistake, forgive them and get on with your relationship with the Lord. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
We want to, in the closing moments of the program today, we want to talk about borrowing from relatives. wow, do we have a lot of couples who are in a mess because they have borrowed from their relatives. And here's the scenario that sort of tickles me a little bit, is that people a young couple will borrow from their relatives, and then they get really resentful because their relatives want to run their life. You get resentful because your relatives want to know where your money's going, and they want to know if you have a savings account, and they get angry if you went out and bought that new truck and you haven't paid them back yet, or if you're making improvements to the house and you haven't done what they felt like you were supposed to do. And you can get in the position that you feel like that your relatives are trying to run your life because you owe them money. But that really is scriptural for them to do that, isn't it?
Well, yes, the borrower is subject to the lender. And so you're a servant to the lender until you get the money paid back. Now, if you've...
That's in Proverbs 22:7 says that.
Proverbs 22:7. And if you have been wise and put it in writing and you have a contract, then you know what your responsibilities are and what they're not. And as long as you're meeting your responsibilities according to the contract, then, you know, their input into your life should be no more than what the bank would have if they had made the loan. But if you're not meeting your responsibilities, then they've got every right to be wanting to know why you're buying this and why you're buying that and how you're managing your money. Mm-hmm. They have every right to that.
But don't we find that married couples usually when finances get really tight, their relatives are the last people that they pay? Mm-hmm. Oftentimes, you know, we pay everybody else, but we let mom and dad wait for their money. So that's really not treating our relatives fairly, and we need to be very careful about honoring the debts that we have. Our time's up for today on Making Your Marriage Work. We've enjoyed being in your home today. I'm Steve Corona.
I'm Connie Corona. Work on your marriage this week. It's worth it.